Greetings, Spartan Nation. It's been a while since our last read aloud. I'm excited to be back with you, and I sure do miss you live and in person. So the last few times that we've talked about states and their capitals, and we've talked about the presidents in order. And so with the states and the state capitals and their order, we've done Alabama, the capital is Montgomery. Alaska, the capital is Juneau. Arizona, the capital is Phoenix. Arkansas, the capital is Little Rock. That's right. And our next state alphabetically is California. I want you to think about what the capital of California is between now and the end of the lesson or the read aloud, and then I will reveal that if you haven't figured it out already. And hopefully you're memorizing these so that if someone asks you, like me, when I see you in person, you'll be able to remember. The first president of the United States was George Washington. Then it was John Adams. After John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. And after Thomas Jefferson, it was James Madison. And after Madison was, we'll talk about it at the end of the lesson. If you go to downtown Memphis, some of the streets are named after of United States presidents. And they are in order. And also in, I think, South Memphis, there are some of the states, and they're in order, or partially in order as well. So at the end, I will reveal the capital of California, and I will reveal the fifth president of the United States. So I'm going to start off with 2 nursery rhymes today. I'm going to read, and then I will read one of my all-time favorite books. And I think that this might have been the first book that I received 30 years ago when I started teaching as a gift from my godmother, Where the Wild Things Are. So I'm going to read that one next. And this, like I said, this was the very first book that I received from my classroom library 30 years ago. All right, so we'll start with nursery rhymes. The Crooked Sixpence. There was a crooked man, and he went a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence beside a crooked stile. He bought a crooked cat, which caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in a little crooked house. And here is the crooked man walking his crooked mile. Put a little beat to it, and it'll be great for jump roping. So go outside and jump rope on a beautiful day. Today it's a little bit rainy. And here's another one. And Margaret's great-grandmother used to sing this one to her. This is the way the ladies ride. Try, tray, tray, tree. Try, tray, tray, tree. This is the way the ladies ride. Try, tray, tray, tree. Try, tray, tray, tree. This is the way the gentlemen ride. Gallop-a-trot, gallop-a-trot. This is the way the gentlemen ride. Gallop-a, gallop-a-trot. This is the way the farmers ride, hobbledy-hoy, hobbledy-hoy. This is the way the farmers ride, hobbledy-hobbledy-hoy. So those are our 2 nursery rhymes for today. So try to check those out. No picture for that one. Sorry, guys. And now on to our read aloud picture book, Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. He also did the illustrations as well. As I'm reading, I want you to think about the main character, and I want you to think about where it takes place and when it takes place, if there is a problem, and what the solution is. This was written in 1963. Now there may be some marks in this book because students read this because it was in my classroom library for many, many years. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind, and another. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, I'll eat you up. So he was sent to bed without eating anything. Have you ever been to bed without eating your dinner? I did one time, and it was not pleasant. It was a long, long time ago. I hope that wasn't you. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew. And grew. And grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world around. This is an AR book, so remember you can take AR book stories tests at home. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through night and day. And in and out of weeks and almost a year to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and they gnashed their terrible teeth and they rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. Till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with a magic trick of staring into their yellow eyes without blinking once, and they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all. And made him king of all wild things. "And now," cried Max, "let the wild rumpus start." "Now stop," Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of the wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around from far away across the world, he smelled things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up, we love you so." And Max said, "No." And the wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped on into his private boat and waved goodbye. And sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day. And into the night of his very own room where he found his supper waiting for him. And guess what? It was still hot. And that is Where the Wild Things Are. Story and pictures by Mari Sendak. It's an AR book, so you can take an AR quiz. And now on to The Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe. Remember, we said it was the first of the series in the series of The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. And here is a map of Narnia. Okay, and it looks like we are chapter 8. Remember, if you don't have any books at home, you can always check out books, and you can download them to a phone, or you can download them to your tablet from the Memphis and Shelby County Library. But also, there's a local bookstore called Novel, and Novel has books, and they'll do curbside pickup for books, and they will also deliver books for a small fee. So if you are running out of books to read and you want books to read, you can check them out at the library digitally, or you can call Novel and they'll have them deliver them local. Support your local business. Novel. Okay, so in chapter 7, the four children met up with the beavers, and they went fishing and had a great meal. And this is chapter 8, right after dinner, in the chapter, What Happened After Dinner. And now, said Lucy, do please tell us what happened to Mr. Tumnus. Ah, that's bad, said Mr. Beaver, shaking his head. That's very, very bad business. There's no doubt he was taken off by the police. I got that from a bird who saw it done. But where's he been taken? Asked Lucy. Well, they were heading northward when they were last seen, and we all know what that means. No, we don't, said Susan. Mr. Beaver shook his head in a very gloomy fashion. Oh, I'm afraid it means they were taking him to her house. But what will they do to him, Mr. Beaver? Gasped Lucy. Well, said Mr. Beaver, you can't exactly say for sure, but there's not many taken in there that ever comes out again. Statues, all full of statues, they say it is, in the courtyards and up the stairs. And in the hall, people she's turned. Oh, he paused and shuddered. Turned into stone. But Mr. Beaver, said Lucy, can't we, we must do something to save him. It's too dreadful, and it's all on my account. I don't doubt you'll save him if you would save him if you could, dearie, said Mrs. Beaver. But you've no chance of getting into the house against her will and ever come out alive. Couldn't we have some stratagem? Said Peter. Couldn't we dress up as something, or pretend to be, peddlers or something, or watch till she's gone out and, hang it all. There must be some way. This Fawn saved my sister at her own risk, Mr. Beaver. We can't just leave him to have that done to him. It's no good, son of Adam, said Mr. Beaver. No good your trying, of all people. But now that Aslan's on the move. Oh, yes, tell us about Aslan, said several voices at once. For once again, that strange feeling, like the first signs of spring, like good news, had come over them. Who is Aslan? Asked Susan. Aslan, said Mr. Beaver. Why, don't you know? He's the king. He's the lord of all the wood. But not often here, you understand. Never in my time or my father's time, but the word has reached us that he has come back. He is in Narnia at this moment. He'll settle the White Queen all right. It is he, not you, that will save Mr. Tumnus. She won't turn him into stone too, said Edmund. Lord love you, son of Adam, but what a simple thing to say, he answered Mr. Beaver with a great laugh. Turn him into stone? If she can stand on her 2 feet and look him in the face, it'll be the most she can do, and more than I expect her. No, he'll put all to rights, it is said in the old rhyme in these parts. Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets his death, and when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. You'll understand when you see him. But shall we see him? Asked Susan.
Why, Dr. Beeve, that's what I brought you here for. I'm to lead you to where we shall meet him, said Mr. Beaver.
Is he a man?
Asked Lucy. Aslan, a man? Mr. Beaver said sternly. Certainly not. I tell you he's the king of the wood, and the son of the great emperor beyond the sea. Don't you know who is the king of beasts? Aslan is a lion, the great lion.
Oh, said Susan, I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion.
Oh, that you will, dearie, and no mistake, said Mrs. Beaver. If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, and they're either braver or they're most or else just silly.
Then he isn't safe, said Lucy.
Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Course he isn't safe. But he is good. He's the king, I tell you.
Oh, I'm longing to see him, said Peter, even if I do feel frightened when it comes to that point.
That's right, son of Adam, said Mr. Beaver, bringing his paws down onto the table with a crash that made all the cups and saucers rattle. And you shall. Word has been sent that you are to meet him tomorrow, if you can, at the stone table.
Where's that? Asked Lucy.
I'll show you, said Mr. Beaver. It's down the river a good step away from here. I'll take you to it.
But meanwhile, what about Mr. Tumnus? Said Lucy.
The quickest way you can help him is by going to meet Aslan, said Mr. Beaver. Once he's with us, then we can begin doing things. Not that we don't need you too, for that's another old rhyme. When Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. So, things must be drawing near their end now. He's come and you've come. We've heard of Aslan coming into these parts before, long ago. Nobody can say when, but there's never been any of your race here before.
That's what I don't understand, Mr. Beaver, said Peter. I mean, isn't the witch herself human?
She'd like to believe it, said Mr. Beaver, and it's on that she bases her claim to be queen. She's no daughter of Eve. She comes of your father Adam's. Here Mr. Beaver bowed. Your father Adam's first wife. Her they called Lilith. And she was one of the jinn. That's what she comes from on one side. And on the other, she comes from the giants. No, there isn't a drop of real human blood in the witch.
That's why she's bad all through, Mr. Beaver, said Mrs. Beaver.
True enough, Mrs. Beaver, replied he. There may be two views about humans, meaning no offense to the present company, but there's no two views about things that look like humans and aren't.
I've known a good dwarf, said Mrs. Beaver.
So have I. Now you come to speak of it, said her husband. But precious few, and they were the ones least like men. But in general, take my advice. When you meet anything that's going to be human and isn't yet, or used to be human once and isn't now, or ought to be human and isn't, you keep your eyes on it and feel for your hatchet. And that's why the witch is always on the lookout for any humans in Narnia. She's been watching for you this many a year, and if she knew there were 4 of you, she'd be more dangerous still.
What's that to do with? Asked Peter.
Because of another prophecy, said Mr. Beaver. Down at Cair Paravel, that's the castle on the sea coast down at the mouth of this river, which ought to be the capital of the whole country, if all was as it should be. Down at Cair Paravel, There are 4 thrones, and it's saying in Narnia, time out of mind, that when 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve sit in those 4 thrones, then it will be the end not only of the White Witch's reign, but of her life. And that is why we had to be so cautious as we came along, for if she knew about you 4, your lives wouldn't be worth a shake of my whiskers. All the children had been attending so hard to what Mr. Beaver was telling them that they had noticed nothing else for a long time. Then during the moment of silence that followed the last remark, Lucy suddenly said, "I say, where's Edmund?" There was a dreadful pause, and then everyone began asking, "Who saw him last? How long has he been missing? Is he outside?" And then all rushed to the door and looked out. The snow was falling thickly and steadily. The green ice of the pool had vanished under the thick white blanket, and from where a little house stood in the center of the dam, you could hardly see either bank. Out they went, plunging well over their ankles into the soft new snow, and went round the house in every direction. "Edmund, Edmund," they called till they were hoarse. But the silently falling snow seemed to muffle their voices, and there was not even an echo in answer. "How perfectly dreadful," said Susan, as they at last came back in despair. "Oh, how I wish we'd never come." What on earth are we to do, Mr. Beaver?" said Peter. Here are the children looking for Edmund. "Do," said Mr. Beaver, who was already putting on his snow boots. "Do! We must be off at once. We haven't a moment to spare." "We'd better divide into 4 search parties and all go out in different directions. Whoever finds him must come back here at once." Search parties, son of Adam," said Mr. Beaver. "What for?" "Why, to look for Edmund, of course." "There's no point in looking for him," said Mr. Beaver. "Whatever do you mean?" said Susan. "He can't be far away, and we've got to find him. What do you mean when you say there's no use looking for him?" "The reason there's no use looking," said Mr. Beaver, "is that we know already where he's gone." Everybody stared in amazement. "Don't you understand?" said Mr. Beaver. "He's gone to her, to the White Witch. He has betrayed us all." "Oh, surely, oh, really," said Susan. "He can't have done that." "Can't he?" said Mr. Beaver, looking very hard at the 3 children, and everything they wanted to say died on their lips, for each felt suddenly quite certain inside that this is exactly what Edmund had done. "But will he know the way?" said Peter. Has he been in this country before?" asked Mr. Beaver. "Has he ever been here alone?" "Yes," said Lucy, almost in a whisper. "I'm afraid he has." "And did he tell you what he'd done or who he'd met?" "Well, no, he didn't," said Lucy. "Then mark my words," said Mr. Beaver. "He has already met the White Witch and joined her side and been told where she lives. I didn't like to mention it before, he being your brother and all, but the moment I set eyes on that brother of yours, I said to myself, treacherous. He had the look of one who has been with the witch and eaten her food. You can always tell them if you've lived long enough in Narnia. Something about their eyes." "Oh, all the same," said Peter in a rather choking sort of voice. "We'll still have to go and look for him. He is our brother after all, even if he is rather a little beast. He's only a kid." Go to the witch's house?" said Mrs. Beaver. Don't you see that the only chance of saving either him or yourselves is to keep away from her?"
"How do you mean?" said Lucy.
"Why, all she wants is to get all four of you. She's thinking all the time of those 4 thrones at Cair Paravel. Once you were all four inside her house, her job would be done, and there'd be 4 new statues in her collection before you had time to speak. But she'll keep him alive as long as there's only one she's got. But she'll want to use him as a decoy, as bait to catch the rest of you with."
"Oh, can no one help us?" wailed Lucy.
"Only Aslan," said Mr. Beaver. "We must go on and meet him. That's our only chance now."
"It seems to me, my dears," said Mrs. Beaver, "that it is very important to know just when he slipped away. How much he can tell her depends on how much he heard. For instance, had we started talking of Aslan before he left? If not, then we may do very well, for she won't know that Aslan has come to Narnia, or that we are meeting him, and will be quite off her guard as that is concerned."
"I don't remember his being here when we were talking about Aslan," began Peter, but Lucy interrupted. "Oh, yes, he was," she said miserably. "Don't you remember? It was he who asked whether the witch couldn't turn Aslan into stone too."
"So he did, by Jove," said Peter. "Just the sort of thing he would say too."
"Worse and worse," said Mr. Beaver. "And the next thing is this. Was he still here when I told you that the place of meeting Aslan was at the stone table?"
And of course, no one knew the answer to this question.
"Because if it was," continued Mr. Beaver, "then she'll simply sledge down in the direction and get between us and the stone table and catch us on our way down. In fact, we shall be cut off from Aslan."
"But that isn't what she'll do first," said Mrs. Beaver. "Not if I know her. The moment that Edmund tells her that we're all here, she'll set out to catch us this very night, and if he's been gone about half an hour, she'll be here in another 20 minutes.
"You're right, Mrs. Beaver," said her husband. "We must all get away from here. There's not a moment to lose."
All right, that is the end of chapter 8. Next time, I will read chapter 9, and let's see if Edmund makes it to the White Witch, if that's where he's gone, and if so, does she come and catch them, or something in between. So, sounds like a problem to me. This is an AR book, as is the other books in the Chronicles of Narnia. We'll keep reading those, and as I said at the beginning, I would reveal to you the next president of the United States, and I said that was the 5th president. 5th president was James Monroe, and his term was from 1817 to 1825. And I also asked you what the capital of California is, and it is Sacramento. So keep learning those states and those presidents, and excuse me, I will be back with you next time to do some more read alouds. And I sure do miss you. Bye-bye.